Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving right into an incredibly dramatic sequence of events from November 12th, 1996. We're going to uncover exactly how a single, absolute catastrophe forever changed the very skies we fly in today. Let's actually track these two flights minute by minute to see how this unfolded. It's the afternoon of November 12th. At 3:55 p.m., a chartered Kazakhstan Airlines flight takes off from Shymkent, making its way toward New Delhi. Then, a bit later that early evening, a Saudi Airlines flight departs from Delhi's Indira Gandhi International Airport. As the evening sets in, an air traffic controller named VK Dutta is sitting at his radar screen. He's watching these two separate blinking dots, and then he watches them fuse into a single point and just completely vanish. To really grasp the human cost here, we have to look at who is actually on board. We aren't just talking about machinery falling from the sky. The Saudi flight was carrying 312 passengers. These were mostly hardworking Indian blue-collar and construction workers heading off to the Gulf just trying to earn a living to support their families. And on the flip side, the Kazakhstan flight was a chartered aircraft packed with small traders from Kyrgyzstan traveling to India to buy wool to sell back home. Two totally different groups of people, just sharing the exact same tragic airspace. Section 1. The Charkhi Dadri collision. Right about 100 kilometers from Delhi, over a small city called Charkhi Dadri, the unthinkable actually happened. Residents down on the ground reported seeing a sudden, terrifyingly bright flash of light up in the evening sky. They said it looked just like lightning. And then came this thundering boom. Literally before anyone could even process what they were looking at, iron debris began raining down from the sky all around them. These two enormous planes had crashed directly into one another. To this day, this remains the absolute worst air disaster in India's entire history. And astonishingly, it's the first and only mid-air collision the country has ever seen. The sheer scale of the wreckage and that massive loss of life was just completely unprecedented.
Section 2. The rules of the sky.
So, how on earth do two massive planes hit each other in the vast, open expanse of the sky? Well, let's establish the basics. Think of airways exactly like highways, but with strict, invisible traffic lanes. Controllers assign planes what's called a flight level. This is a highly regulated standard that requires at least 1,000 feet of vertical separation and a 14-kilometer safety radius between planes. Basically, it's an invisible safety bubble designed to keep everyone perfectly separated. But here's where things get complicated. The 1990s suffered from a massive technological gap. At the time, Delhi was relying on outdated primary radar. This tech emits radio waves to show horizontal distance, sure, but it absolutely cannot detect exact altitude. Now, secondary radar, which uses a transponder on the plane to transmit precise vertical distance, did exist, but it was largely unadopted in 1990s Delhi. What does that mean? It means controllers were flying almost entirely blind when it came to knowing exactly how high these planes actually were. Because they lacked that secondary radar, air traffic controllers had one of the most stressful jobs on the planet. They were handling 20 to 30 flights an hour by manually chatting with pilots over the radio. They had to ask for speeds, ask for altitudes, literally write them down on paper, and mentally calculate the sky's traffic. Just imagine the sheer pressure of keeping track of the heights of 30 planes an hour entirely in your head. Section 3. The Swiss cheese model. Okay, so with highly trained controllers doing their absolute best under all that stress, how did the system fail so catastrophically? Well, investigators use something called the Swiss cheese model to explain disasters like this. It's a theory where a disaster doesn't happen from just one massive, glaring failure. Instead, imagine your multiple layers of defense as slices of Swiss cheese. An accident only occurs when multiple small, totally unrelated errors, or holes in the cheese, perfectly align at the exact wrong time. In 1996, the holes in that cheese were severe. Step 1, there was a single shared air corridor that forced incoming and departing planes into the exact same airspace. Step 2, they had total reliance on that primary radar without any automated altitude tracking. And step 3, severe language barriers and really poor communication protocols in the cockpit. These were the fatal holes, and on that evening, they lined up perfectly. Section 4. Why did it happen? When authorities finally recovered the black boxes from the wreckage, they could finally see exactly how those specific holes aligned. And the flight data revealed a pretty chilling truth. The Saudi flight, it followed its instructions perfectly, maintaining its assigned 14,000-foot altitude. But the Kazakh flight, which was instructed to stay at 15,000 feet, actually descended to 14,000 feet. Why? Well, the Kazakh pilots were relying on a radio operator to translate the ATC instructions from English to Russian. To make matters worse, the cockpit recordings showed the pilots were distracted, complaining to each other about Delhi airport traffic. In the middle of that distraction and translation, they fundamentally misunderstood the altitude command, dropping right into the Saudi plane's path. There's a really telling quote from the accident report conclusion. It simply says, "The instruction from the ATC was subjected to an error of understanding." So the absolutely crucial point here is that a simple but fatal misunderstanding of a flight-level instruction completely bypassed every single manual safety protocol they had. The human element failed, right where the technology simply wasn't there to catch it. Section 5. Revolutionizing Modern Aviation. The horrific loss of life at Charkhi Dadri didn't just end with an investigation. It sparked a radical, aggressive, and truly global overhaul of aviation safety. Refusing to ever let a tragedy like this happen again, the Indian government put its foot down. An Indian aviation official noted, "The government was willing to take some action, and boy did they ever. They essentially forced the entire global aviation industry to adapt to new safety standards, absolutely regardless of the financial cost." They mandated the immediate adoption of TCAS, or the Traffic Collision Avoidance System. Now, this is an automated system installed in an aircraft that triggers a loud alarm if another plane comes within 1,000 vertical feet. But more importantly, it explicitly tells the pilot exactly which direction to fly, up or down, to avoid a crash. It's an absolute game changer, the ultimate technological failsafe. And the speed of this safety overhaul was just staggering. The disaster struck in November 1996. By April 1997, India's civil aviation minister announced mandatory TCAS. And by December 1998, there was a hard, non-negotiable deadline for all 30-plus seater aircraft in India to have it installed. Even though international airlines were loudly complaining that TCAS was just way too expensive to implement that fast, India stood its ground. They basically forced the hand of global carriers. If you wanted to operate in Indian airspace, you had to have TCAS. Period. Methodically, every single hole in that Swiss cheese was closed. They implemented dedicated, separate air corridors for incoming and departing flights. They rapidly deployed those secondary radars to track precise aircraft altitudes automatically. They strictly enforced TCAS on all major passenger planes. And finally, India successfully lobbied the International Civil Aviation Organization to mandate a minimum English proficiency for all international pilots. Every single point of failure from that day was systematically eliminated. Which brings us to a question you might have pondered while staring out an airplane window at 30,000 feet. Why don't planes collide midair today? Well, the incredibly safe skies we enjoy now were built directly upon the tragic, hard-learned lessons of Charkhi Dadri. Every single alarm and radar system in modern cockpits is essentially written in the blood of past mistakes. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. But before we wrap up, it leaves us with one final, pretty important thought. As aviation becomes increasingly reliant on automated systems like TCAS to save us from human error, what new, completely invisible holes are we accidentally creating in our modern slices of Swiss cheese?